subscribers to the 0 episode of Nick and Dave Deep Dive the Metaverse. I am Nick.
And I'm Dave.
And we're here to introduce you to the concept of our podcast and some of the formats and themes that we'll be exploring, and just give you an idea of what to expect in the coming months.
Yeah, we've had a idea brewing in our heads for quite a while of starting a podcast. It was suggested by one of our friends or wives or something. And we decided that we would finally get it done, and we brainstormed a bunch of ideas for formats, but basically the overall concept is we're just going to record whatever we want.
Yeah, it's we both were fans of media, various types of media, music and movies and literature, and I like to really deep dive into a thing, like maybe an artist's discography or filmography, and explore the different themes and concepts that stretch across the meta of the collected works.
Yeah, I'm pretty much the same, but with slightly different things. And usually we have pretty different opinions on things. We'll like different things about certain things, or we'll just dislike exactly opposite, or dislike the thing. I'll dislike what he likes, and he'll dislike what I like. And so it makes it for a good discussion.
Yeah, we want to keep capture our natural banter and some of the energy that goes on in our discussions we've been having over the last 20 years.
Yeah,
and
something like that.
Yeah, and stop just subjecting our poor patient wives to it and force it on you, the divers of the metaverse.
Yeah, willing victims, I guess. I guess that makes you a participant. So let's talk about the different formats that we came up with.
So the first format, probably the one you'll be hearing the most often, and that we'll be doing for episode 1, is just the standard deep dive. We take a movie or an album or a piece of literature, and we explore its themes and ideas, and really get down into the minutia of the movie, talk about what we liked, what we didn't like, and rate the movie ultimately.
Yeah, and this is a little bit different than a standard conversation that you'd have right after watching a movie. We're going to do a bit of research. We're going to read some things, look at the meta around the movie, talk about all the different aspects of it, because that's how we like to get into things that we're really interested in. So it's going to start off with single movies or single albums, and then we'll eventually move into doing the entire filmography of a director or the discography of a band. Yeah,
just for instance, if we wanted to deep dive into all the works of Quentin Tarantino, we'd go through those movies in chronological order and discuss them. It wouldn't be as in-depth as a singular deep dive, but it would be focusing on the meta, the overarching concept of the whole filmography or discography.
Yeah, we've talked about doing a few different directors and a few different bands, and it'll more be about talking about that person or that group of people's artistic vision and kind of commonalities, things we liked, things that we didn't like, and just sort of giving our commentary on a person's or group's entire works. So what's the next format?
The next format would be head-to-head, where we usually would take a movie, say if we're going to compare the Paul Verhoeven RoboCop versus the remake from the early 2000s. We'd deep dive into both movies and what carried over between the two and what doesn't work or works between them. Basically, just put both of them under the microscope and determine what holds up.
Yeah, I really like this format because I like to read books and then watch the movies and TV shows. But usually it's hard to do a comparison of a book versus visual media. But doing movie versus movie, that's really natural, especially when you have one that's thought of as kind of the seminal work or the one by which everything else is judged. And then we can do some good comparison. And there's a lot of options that we have for movies that have been made many times. One that we threw out there was just like Dracula or Godzilla, things like that. There's a lot of head-to-heads we can do that would actually be many different movies.
Yeah, it would be. There's so many like versions of Dracula that would actually be. It could be a multiple episode thing in and of itself. There's so many of them, but
yeah, we briefly talked about doing, part 1 and part 2 episodes. Based on how much media we have to consume and how much research we want to do into it. But ultimately, when we're doing a commentary on, say, the season of a TV show or an entire TV show, it's going to just, by definition, have to be less researched and a little more commentary, just because there's so much more media. So what's the third main format we're going to use?
The final format would be Change My Mind. This would be, as Dave mentioned earlier, there's many things that we disagree on and have always disagreed on, and to the point that they sort of become running jokes. For instance, Dave is a big fan of the band Tool, and I'm Tool agnostic. I just don't care about them.
Yeah, and anytime we go to like a punk rock show or whatever, and they're playing the Ramones beforehand, I'm just like completely meh, while everyone else is totally rocking out. I'm just not into it. And so the concept behind a Change My Mind episode is the one who is enthusiastic about something needs to change the mind of the other person. This is probably the format we've explored the least in our conversations. I'm not sure they're going to be as long or as well researched because it's maybe not well researched, but as thorough because only one person is doing it. It's kind of a one-sided show, but it could be interesting.
Yeah, one of us would lay out the argument, and we'll see how far we can push the fair use of the internet, and as far as playing music, perhaps from the artists or that we're trying to talk about.
I'm a little sketchy on that one.
Yeah, we don't want to get ourselves sued. We're independently financed.
Yeah, there's just normal people with regular jobs and lives, and we're super fans of this stuff, and we don't want to step on the rights of the people that we're enthusiastic fans of.
Oh, definitely.
And so those are our major formats, but I guess kind of the coda to that is that this is an evolving podcast. We're probably going to change things as we go. If there's a new idea or a new concept for an episode, we'll probably just do it, give it a shot.
Yeah, we're going to ultimately be flexible, and this is just a vehicle for us to throw our ideas out into the metaverse and see if they stick. So it will be ever evolving.
Yeah, and I'm really looking forward to it. I love the idea of being experimental, talking about live events and various things like that. And I'm just going to leave it open. And maybe if we do some kind of bad episodes, that'll be okay. It'll be a learning experience. We'll get something out of it, and it won't be a total waste of time. All right, so we're going to move on into our next segment.
Welcome back, divers. We're going to go into a mini version of our head-to-head segment. We're going to call it Head-to-Head Rapid Fire.
But instead of having a piece of media against a piece of media, this is just going to be he and I asking each other rapid fire questions, a little bit of a getting to know you moment, particularly for you guys. I tried to choose some questions here that I wasn't exactly sure what Nick's answers would be, but ultimately I've known him for 20 years, so I probably could predict more than half of these just knowing him. So we'll go one question each, back and forth.
All right. The first one, it's the big one. Star Wars or Star Trek?
You know, that's insane because that's my first question as well.
I said it was the big one.
It is the big one. It's super important. And this one's really, really tough because I would say if I'm just going to sit down and watch something and really enjoy it, I'm probably going to have to go with Star Wars. I think the movies are better made. The Star Trek movies are not super good. The TV is amazing. But the reason I'm hesitant to just go full on Star Wars is because my childhood was really defined by Star Trek. My dad is a huge Trekkie. I went to many Star Trek conventions with him. I met Michael Dorn and Jonathan Frakes and all kinds of people. And so Star Trek was always like a really big deal in my childhood. But as far as an adult, I'm more into Star Wars than I am into Star Trek. And proof of that is I haven't shelled out the money to CBS or whatever so I can watch Picard. I'm going to wait till it's all out. Then I'll pay them and I'll binge it.
God, that looks good, though. That
looks awesome.
Did you watch Discovery?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah, it was pretty good. It was no TNG, of course.
Yeah.
And my favorite, which happens to be the best Star Wars or Star Trek show, was Deep Space Nine, but it was good.
See, and that's probably a future deep dive because I've never actually watched Deep Space Nine, and everyone says how good it is.
It's the best one. I mean, It's that and Babylon 5 from that era.
Yeah.
Amazing shows. Anyways, so my first question is Star Wars or Star Trek?
I'm definitely a bigger fan of Star Wars. I'm more passionate about it.
For sure.
But if it was down to which fictional universe I want to live in, I would much prefer to live in the Star Trek universe than the Star Wars universe.
I can see that.
But yeah, I mean, I saw Return of the Jedi in the theater probably as like a 4-year-old. And that was like a formative experience.
You're old.
There's a direct line from me seeing that movie to us recording this podcast.
Sure. I don't think I saw them in the theater as a kid. My parents were pretty humble at that point, working pretty lousy jobs and the like. But I remember when they were re-released, and I know everyone maligns the special editions or whatever, but for me, that was the first time I saw the original trilogy in the theaters, and it was great. And I was among the people lined up, and I went with friends, and it was pretty cool. I saw all of them multiple times, so that was kind of an adolescence thing for me.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
I guess it's back to you for questions. And I just want to know, I didn't do all geeky culture here. Some of the things a lot of it is geeky culture, but there's like 2 or 3 sprinkled in that are just like regular person questions.
Oh, I don't know that I have any regular person questions, but they are not all genre related.
Okay. All right. So your turn.
Number 2, WWF era. That's the Hulkamania 1980s era of professional wrestling, or the Attitude era of the late 90s, early 2000s. Your Stone Cold Steve Austin, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, D-Generation X.
That's a really good question because it's all trash, but it's lovable trash. It's hard to disavow it. I know it's not cool to be into the WWE. I have a buddy who is, our age, which is to say young Gen Xers or old millennials, depending on how you look at it. But I have a friend our age who loves WWE still, and I just can't see it. But as a child, I lived and died by Saturday morning at 11 o'clock when the Ultimate Warrior was running out like a madman from parts unknown. That was my jam. I am all in on that. The Heart Foundation, the Rockers, Demolition, all of that stuff. Dude. Pure, just classic. Like my childhood, I wanted to be in Demolition. Like I wanted to be those guys. I wanted huge spikes and black leather harnesses and just to destroy people, because I guess I was kind of an aggro kid. But that was my jam.
I remember thinking those guys were absolutely terrifying as a little kid. And it's like, it's really weird because they're just two beefy guys in football shoulder pads with spikes glued onto them.
And like a black welding mask.
Yeah. And it's like, but they were terrifying as a little kid, because little kids have this ability to just give themselves over to a fantasy completely. There's no problem suspending disbelief, and wrestling just feeds into that.
Yeah, so I have to go with the WWF era. Although the other era was cool, I just wasn't that into it.
What about the cartoon, the Hulk Hogan's Rockin' Wrestling? Did you watch that?
I did, and really I liked it most because Rowdy Roddy Piper was on it, and I'm a big Piper fan.
Hometown hero.
Oh yeah, right here in Pacific Northwest. So I was really big into that. I mean, as a kid, I pretty much was glued to anything on the Saturday morning.
Oh, for sure.
So my next question is one of my, I guess, regular guy questions is, what's your favorite beer style? And as a bonus, what's your favorite brewery right now?
Oh, okay. Well, I think overall, if I look at just my check-ins on Untapped, my favorite beer style is stouts. Just a typical dry Irish stout or a milk stout, or just stouts in general. I'm a dark beer aficionado. I don't necessarily drink them in the summertime. I'm not an animal. They're a winter and fall beer. But that's definitely my favorite. And my favorite brewery right now remains Culmination. I think they're a completely underrated brewery in Portland, Oregon. In Beervana, Beer City, USA, there's so many breweries there, and Culmination's under a lot of people's radar, and it shouldn't be. They're a superb brewery.
Yeah, I'd say they're probably under my radar as well. They're probably not listed in my top 3, but that was one of my regular guy questions. You're up.
Okay, I don't know if this is a regular guy question, but Norwegian black metal or Swedish death metal?
Oh, I mean, I think you could probably predict that.
I could, but I think
easily.
it's still, I think there's something to chew on there.
Yeah, I'm a big Norwegian black metal fan. Have been since pretty much the late 90s, I guess. When a buddy of ours introduced me to a couple of key bands, Emperor being one of them, which is one of the founders, Norwegian black metal style. But I guess technically they're second generation if you want to get really technical and into the weeds. But I'm also a big fan of Swedish death metal. I love At the Gates. I love all the melodic Gothenburg sound. I love things like Dark Tranquility. I mean, I've seen all of these bands live. I've made it a point to see them all. And when I go to that festival this summer, Psycho Las Vegas, At the Gates is playing, and I'm super excited about that, but also Emperor. So basically this question is being asked, and I don't have to choose at the festival. Mm-hmm. But if I had to choose, it would be Norwegian black metal. I like to play guitar like that. I like to play fast. I like to play melodic, not as much as the kind of the chunky, more thrash-inspired Swedish guys.
I mean, not that I asked the question to myself. I do probably lean slightly towards the black metal also, but didn't we see At the Gates play with Earth Crisis upstairs at La Luna?
Yeah, that was awesome.
That's a wine tasting room now.
Wow. That's crazy.
Sometimes I go and I peek in that window and I just cry a little bit.
All of the amazing shows that we saw there.
Yeah. Now it's rich people sipping wine and talking about it.
Well, I guess that's how cities get gentrified. But that's the way it goes. All right. So I've got a question. This is another franchise versus franchise, IP versus IP. And I chose this one because it's both books and screen. Do you like Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings?
We've got another double up question. I phrased it differently, but
all right.
I'm more. It is a really hard one. I'm more into at the moment Game of Thrones, and Game of Thrones is where I've dug more into the minutia and read the supplementary material where I've never even picked up a copy of the Silmarillion. But I feel embarrassed to pick the upstart over the originator. The Lord of the Rings trilogy and more The Hobbit really kickstarted my love of fantasy and really, I mean, it's the basis for what we think of that genre. So if I'm being honest, it is probably Game of Thrones, but if I respected myself more, I would say it was Lord of the Rings.
It's one of those hipster questions, I guess. It's like there's a part of every nerd that wants to be like, I'm into the older, more pure thing. I'm into the quintessential influence of the thing that you're into. I guess it's like a cool kid way, you know, like if there's in music that's huge, everyone's like, oh yeah, well if you like those guys, I'm into the people that inspired them to even become a band. Well, this is sort of the same thing. Martin has worn his Tolkien influences on his sleeve forever. He even styles himself with 2 R's on as an homage, and it's it's the same answer. I love The Hobbit and I love Lord of the Rings, and as a child I watched the Hobbit movie, the cartoon, over and over and over and over, and I've watched every Lord of the Rings anything, and I've read all the books, even the Silmarillion. But if I had to just choose one that I'm gonna enjoy right now, it's got to be Game of Thrones. And I guess that's just how things go. The genre has been refined to be a little more interesting, a little more political, a little more character driven, a little less I guess a little less basic, and that's just by virtue of time.
There is a lot of walking in Lord of the Rings. It focuses very, I mean, it really is just a long walk.
Yeah.
There's not a great deal of humanity to the characters the way there is in Game of Thrones. They're much more visceral, not realistic. That's a dangerous word when you're talking about fantasy, but they're more human characters, I think.
Yeah, I think he wrote them intentionally to be flawed but relatable. Like someone like Jaime Lannister is just a bad dude. He's a villain, but you can understand some of the decisions he made, and you can maybe even forgive some of the bad things he's done. And there are even less cut and dried examples, like Arya Stark. Everyone loves her. I don't know anyone that doesn't have her in their top 3 characters.
Right.
But she's like a cold-blooded killer, and she did a lot of bad things. So no character is one-dimensional. There are no easy people to just write off. I mean, maybe there are some, like the mountain that rides is intentionally one-dimensional, but he's not a main character. He's not a perspective. So you don't know what he's doing. Yeah. He's a plot device more than anything. Anyway, that's enough on that question. So I guess I asked it to you, and then I answered it back though you just asked me.
So it's my question.
Yeah, you can go.
Dark Knight Returns or Watchmen?
The movies.
However you feel like answering.
I'm going to go Dark Knight on this one. I like Batman better than I like The Watchmen in general, just sort of on the meta. And I really like those movies. The Dark Knight Returns, that trilogy. Or I like the movies that were in that vein. I like that comic. I just like Batman better than The Watchmen. Part of The Watchmen that kind of puts me off is that my general view of comic books is that they are not generally to be taken seriously. And I was able to suspend some of that with Batman and Dark Knight Returns. I was able to kind of get into it and get over my comic book prejudice, but not with The Watchmen. It's a little bit too cheeky. They're a little too on the nose sometimes, like the comedian, and I don't know, just things about The Watchmen occasionally put me off, and I'm rarely put off by any of the super gritty Batman. I don't really like any of the shiny Batman stuff. I'm sure you know what I mean. But any of the
Schumacher nipples on the Batsuit Batman.
Yeah, and I don't really like the wearing a jumpsuit Harley Quinn very much, just because it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I don't know. Maybe I'm just not a big enough fan to appreciate it all. But
I just saw that Birds of Prey movie, though. That's good.
Was it good? I haven't seen it.
I mean, this will sound dismissive if I say that it's the girl Deadpool, but it's just a quick way of getting the idea of the tone and the action level and the level of violence to the movie across.
Sometimes you have to follow a successful business example.
Yeah.
A business model. Like, you have to make money on these passion projects.
Yeah.
And Deadpool figured out a way to make a rated R comic book movie profitable. And
exactly.
So they're doing it.
And it definitely has its own voice. It's a much more technicolor Batman universe, maybe that sparkly side of the Batman universe that you don't like as much, as opposed to the Marvel-y thing that Deadpool does. But just for elevator pitch, girl Deadpool, pretty good.
I can check that out. I mean, I say that, but I probably won't unless my wife Carrie wants to watch it. Otherwise, I probably won't watch it. But it does sound interesting. I like those dark comedies. I have a dark sense of humor, and so dark comedies appeal to me, even in superhero form. Mm-hmm. So I guess I'm up. I'm going to choose a classic heavy metal question, which is Megadeth or Metallica.
I didn't write that question down, and I almost did because I knew what your answer would be.
Sure.
But my answer would be the same. It would definitely be Metallica. I'm not going to make a pretense of the cooler one. I think I just like Metallica more.
Yeah, better songs.
Yeah, I could. Yeah, I'm not a Dave Mustaine fan. I'm not a Megadeth fan, really, even in the slightest.
Okay, well, I am. I definitely am a Megadeth fan, but I mean, historically, I've been a Metallica super fan when I was a young guy.
That's how I met you, was as the Metallica super fan.
Yeah, and I mean, that was way back. I mean, that was back in the day in the late 90s. And I was huge into them, and I drifted away a little bit in those bad album years, as they've come to be known.
Right.
But they're still a great band, and so I would choose the same. I was fairly sure you'd say Metallica, but, you know, I figured I'd throw it out there.
Megadeth is a bit like Tool in that it is one of those bands that there's certain songs, certain albums that I associate with being a teenager that get me kind of psyched when I hear them. But overall...
Like Countdown to Extinction.
Yeah, exactly. But overall, I don't want to listen to Megadeth.
Yeah, his newer stuff is kind of not awesome anyway. Well, some people love it. I just don't. I guess I shouldn't qualify all of my opinions with just, well, that's my opinion, man. No, of course it's my opinion. It's my opinion podcast. So
exactly.
There you go. I guess it's your turn.
I also did a 90s music question, one that we used to ask all of the time.
All right.
It's Glenn Danzig versus Henry Rollins.
Oh man, that's tough. Glenn Danzig the person versus Henry Rollins the person, not the music of, or where are we going with this?
You could do it however you want to. It could be arm wrestling, or it could be songwriting, or it could be just their personalities, their personas. So I am a bit of a spooky boy myself, and so I like Danzig. His music persona, the dark songwriting. I love the Misfits. We went and saw the Misfits. We've seen Danzig, and
and many times, and I love the music. I would say I like Glenn Danzig's songwriting better than Henry Rollins' songwriting. I also like his showbiz persona, like the kind of the evil Elvis kind of thing, and I liked the Misfits, the Fiend Club thing better. That's not to say I don't like, like proto-hardcore punk rocker guy with tattoos and just all energy and anger and shouting. I like all that too. I'm into that, but I like a little more. I'm a musician myself. I play guitar, and I like a little more melody in my music than Black Flag and Henry Rollins has to offer. Generally speaking, I don't find it to be extremely musical. It's very energy driven. It's very focused on being a musical statement. But the other side of that coin is that I think Danzig as a dude is kind of a dweeb, and he's an elitist, and he's a narcissist.
Don't tell Danzig that we're saying any of this. We would love to have you as a guest or a sponsor.
Yeah, sorry, Danzig. I love you. I love you. Anyway, I don't like some of the narcissistic things he's done, but I understand that he's wants to live a level of private life that is not really afforded to someone like him with cult fan members.
I mean, I've gone to his house.
Did you look in his window for his kitty cats?
I didn't like cross the gate. I just took pictures on the sidewalk in front of his house. But
yeah.
But I have been there.
So he gets shitty about people like you. But Henry Rollins is cool. Like, we've gone to see him speak in his spoken word tours. He said some stuff about some topics that really resonated with me. Not the last time I saw him, but the time before that. It was commentary on the Iraq War, which I fought in. So I emailed him, and I just with some of my thoughts and my opinions, and he responded like in, I wouldn't say like a long form email, but he certainly thought about what I wrote, and he talked to me like I was just a regular dude. That's impossible with Glenn Danzig.
Yeah.
And I don't think Glenn Danzig is more famous than Henry Rollins. He's just more rock star than Henry Rollins. Henry Rollins is just like a cool dude. So I would rather listen to Danzig's music, but I would rather go like hang out with Henry Rollins.
That's actually probably my answer also. The Misfits are my favorite band of all time.
Yeah, they're great.
But I have a sticker on my refrigerator that says, "What would Henry Rollins do?" So it's like the Misfits are my favorite, and so Danzig held that spot. But Henry Rollins is like an aspirational figure to me. He's someone I would like to be when I grow up, assuming I ever do.
Yeah. Well, I don't think he ever did either. So it's good. Yeah. So I could have probably predicted that answer from you as well, and you probably could have predicted mine, but I think there's a lot of nuance there because Henry Rollins did really make great music too, and I know you're a little more of a punk rocker than me, and so I could have seen you going the other way. All right, so here's another question from me, and this one's kind of tongue-in-cheek, I guess. What's your Hogwarts house?
I am a Gryffindor, borderline Slytherin. Or Slitherdor, if you prefer.
You're like Harry Potter himself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I am. I'm a solid Gryffindor that talks to snakes.
Yeah. All right, and you well know that I am a Slytherin. But I would say whenever you do those tests or whatever, I've had it come up a couple of times with Ravenclaw because I'm a bit of a nerd.
Yeah.
So
when I did it on Pottermore, it was Gryffindor, and when I actually at Warner Brothers Studios had the sorting hat put on my head, it was Slytherin. But I think the guy just kind of went off of my clothes and just assumed I was a Slytherin.
Yeah, it's like, tattooed guy wearing black clothes. There you go.
Yeah.
All right, cool. I knew that, but I was curious what your thoughts were.
Okay. So this is a weird one because you're an anti-console person, but Super Nintendo or Sega Genesis?
Oh, man. When I was a kid, I had a Nintendo Entertainment System, the regular one, and then when Super Nintendo came out, I didn't have it, and I had a friend that had a Super Nintendo, and I used to go over there and we'd play Final Fantasy all the time. Just sort of, that's a game where multiple people can play. Even if there's only one person manning the controller, you're talking about what's your party composition, what are you going to do, what are you going to do, where are you going to go. And so me and my buddy played a lot of Final Fantasy hanging out. Eventually we played D&D. It evolved into that whole deal. But I don't really have any experience with Sega Genesis aside from messing around in department stores playing the demo of Sonic. So I don't have a good measure of if Genesis was amazing for its time or not, but I do have those fond memories of playing Final Fantasy on Super Nintendo.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because that's one where there was not a lot of multi-console households in those days.
Oh yeah.
People had one or the other, and so
they're expensive.
Yeah, they were very expensive, or they seemed like it.
Well, inflation-wise, they were expensive.
Yeah. I didn't have a Sega Genesis either, but it seemed like that was the more gamer area. I'm doing air quotes system, nerdy. The gamer system compared to the Super Nintendo, which had a little bit of more of a kid's reputation even then. Well,
even now, Nintendo is for casuals, and hardcore gamers play PlayStation Network or Xbox Live. So
although all the Sega games are on, aren't they on Nintendo now? Am I wrong about that?
I don't own a console, so I have no idea. I'm a PC gamer. Okay. Although Carrie and I talked about getting a console. Because there are a couple of Sony exclusive games that we wanted to play. Like Sheila really likes Kingdom Hearts, and I really wanted to get The Last of Us and The Last of Us 2 because they're Sony exclusive, and I'm a big fan of some of the voice actors in those The Last of Us games, particularly Laura Bailey, and so. I know that's kind of a nerdy reason to want to buy a game, but they also have amazing Metacritic ratings. But it never turned out to be worth buying a console just for those games.
Well, maybe you grab a used one.
Sure. When the new PlayStation comes out, I can get an older one and play those games.
Yeah, but then you'll just be stuck wanting the upgrade when the sequels come.
You know me. I'll buy the good one and then play the old games on it because I'm just a sucker. So was that you?
That was me.
Okay, that was you. So I'm going to ask you one that I don't actually know the answer here, and this could be a lot or a little. I'm saying, what do you like better, X-Men or Avengers? And you can go movies, comics, both, whatever.
That's an interesting one because of how dominant the Avengers have become in pop culture.
But as kids, Avengers were second rate to the X-Men in our lives.
For sure. Yes, for sure.
Wolverine was everything.
As a kid, it would have been X-Men all the way. I really my favorite superhero is the Incredible Hulk. It has always been since I was a little kid. And he got kicked out of the Avengers very early on, like issue 2, man. Like back in '64, and even though that happened before I was born, it's something that
it still hurts you.
Yeah, I held a grudge against for into adulthood nearly. Like it always kind of had me down on the Avengers, and it wasn't until Mark Miller's and Brian Hitch's The Ultimates came out that I started to come around on the Avengers. I started to see...
Ultimates was really good.
Yeah, to see what they were all about. And then, of course, now after the movies, the Avengers have eclipsed the X-Men in my heart. They're much more, what I'm into. But you are right. As kids, the Avengers were trash and the X-Men ruled. And that was just how it was.
But the Mighty Thor, hard to beat. Me being kind of into history and Norse mythology of all cultures. I'm into that kind of thing. But I was always like, oh, they only have one character I really like, and that's Thor, and the rest of the characters I'm mediocre on. So I don't know what I would choose nowadays, because I'm a little bit soured on comic book movies. So I don't really have a strong leaning towards either franchise right now. Your question.
All right. Similar franchise versus franchise. Masters of the Universe or Thundercats?
Ooh, man, that's hard. I loved them both so much as a kid. I watched those shows pretty much religiously, and I had toys from either one. I didn't have like all of them, but I'd have like a couple, so I'd have like Lion-O battling He-Man.
But they weren't good scale with each other. They actually make Thundercat toys that are scaled to the Masters of the Universe toys now.
Oh, man.
So if you're, really want to have them fight, now it's much more achievable.
Yeah, that's really high on my list. I'm going to grab one plastic guy and like smash it against the other plastic guy like I did as a kid.
Underrated fun.
It is pretty fun. But I guess I would have to go with... In the grand scheme of things, in the metaverse, Masters of the Universe has more capital in my heart, because I am a sucker for swords and sorcery. I love creepy old castles. I love anything with skulls or skeletons or wizards. And He-Man, Masters of the Universe has all of that. And it was cool. I mean, they had guys riding cats and all sorts of neat things. Of course, there are parts I don't like about it that I wasn't that into as a kid. But I realized that it wasn't really written by masterpiece theater authors. It was written in order to sell toys.
Pretty much.
Thundercats, probably better cartoon.
It's definitely better animated. It's I don't know the animation studio, but a Japanese animation studio did that versus the Filmation on He-Man, which they really phoned it in.
It was definitely a better cartoon, but for my investment, I like the whole theme, the swords and sorcery, all of that in Master of the Universe.
I'd agree with that. What's your next question?
It's me. Okay, this one's pretty simple, and hopefully we can lay this down in real life in the future. What color would your lightsaber be?
Green.
Oh, that was easy.
Yeah, I've thought this through a lot because
you like the Hulk.
Well, not because I like the Hulk. I mean, if it comes down to me, 4 years old, sitting in that theater watching Return of the Jedi, when the lightsaber, R2 shoots the lightsaber from one sail barge to the other, and he pops it out, and it's green and not blue. Mm-hmm. It's like, my little head exploded. Like, whoa, it's green. Why is it green? Kyber crystals didn't exist yet. We hadn't none of this stuff had been thought out. But yeah, the green lightsaber just like imprinted on me in that moment, and that's what it's got to be.
All right. I would be red pretty clearly, but I would like to go down to Disneyland and do that whole lightsaber building experience. And it's not that far of a travel since we live on the West Coast. All right, your question.
Conan of Samaria or Geralt of Rivia?
Oh man, that's like old versus new in my heart. Mm-hmm. I love the old Conan movies and Schwarzenegger, and of course I read the comic books. I was buying those, and I never really got into the novels. Honestly, I'm ashamed to say that as a nerd, because I've read so much fantasy. I've read probably hundreds of fantasy books. But I haven't really read the old Conan novels. Maybe I should do that. Maybe we should do an episode on Conan.
I have read all of the original Robert E. Howard novels, but in high school, so they're not fresh in my mind.
You're double that age.
Yeah.
I mean, it's gone at this point.
It is. I mean, I just have the impression of reading them. I don't have all the memories.
Yeah, so I think we should consider doing some Conan, maybe a franchise thing where we books, movies, all of it.
Yeah.
That might be fun. But I guess I just got done reading the first, it's not actually the first book in the series, but one of the Witcher books. I think it was called Last Wish. It's a collection of short stories about Geralt. And I googled like what order should you read the Witcher stuff in. And they really suggested you read these two collections of short stories first and then start the series at book 1. So I just finished that first short story compilation, and it's novel length. And of course I watched the show, and they were really, really good. The writing in the books is awesome, and the show did a pretty darn good job of presenting it to the world in a visual form. Man, I don't know if I can say that my recent flame for Geralt of Rivia is more than the Conan the Barbarian and all of those movies. I love them so much, but I would kind of put those in put that in a similar category where Conan meant a lot to me as a kid and I was really into it. But nowadays, I would probably watch The Witcher rather than watch a Conan movie. And as far as books go, I'm probably going to finish The Witcher before I finish Conan.
That makes sense.
So it's a tough one, but probably same with the Game of Thrones versus Lord of the Rings. I'm going to go with the modern thing because it built on the legacy of the previous one.
Totally. I think I still would go Conan over the two. I just finished reading Jason Aaron's run on the Conan comic book, and Conan's still present in my universe, or my metaverse. Stay on brand. So this is where I was going to ask you, George R.R. Martin or J.R.R. Tolkien.
Didn't you just ask me a question though?
I did. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm jumping the gun.
Getting me. So I'm gonna go ahead and ask you. This is one of those regular guy meals questions. What would your final meal be if you order one last meal? What would it be?
Oh, geez. I'm gonna go custom on this.
All right.
So I have when it comes to cuisine, really I have kind of 3 big loves.
Okay.
It's Mexican food, or subgenre burritos, pizza, and Japanese food.
Okay.
And something, and this is not going to have anything to do with Japanese food, I just had to mention it, but something that I've always wanted is the perfect combination of pizza and burrito. I've really tried to,
like, sometimes you can get a taco pizza and that's pretty good, but are you talking like more like a pizza burrito?
I'm talking more like a burrito with a tour of Italy inside of it. I want probably like a big chewy mission style flour tortilla, and I'm going to put down a layer of red sauce in there, and maybe a risotto in place of Spanish rice.
Oh, wow.
And black olives, that kind of goes either way.
Sure.
California burrito or Italian food. Some eggplant meatballs in there. Roll that up, and we'll just maybe chimichanga this. Deep fry it. It's the last meal. We're not thinking about calorie intake here, and so that the pizza chimichanga.
Oh, you could get it Japanese style by tempura battering it.
Oh, yeah,
first.
get that in there, yeah, and then we roll it in panko breading, and then I did cover the big 3 that way. So
okay.
I'd
eat that.
A tempura breaded pizza filled chimichanga is my last meal, and then I go happily off to Odin's mead hall to drink with my ancestors.
That's kind of a silly choice. I mean, just sort of mash it all together, but I would eat that. I think
that's our new food cart.
Oh, okay. New idea. Do not take this from us. We won't use it. We'll never make a food cart. But if someone made that food cart, I would go there.
Yeah, 100%. For sure. Whatever. We'll brainstorm some pun ideas for pizza burrito names, and you make them and we'll eat them.
Yeah, for sure. We just want one for free for the idea. So my next question is.
You already asked
I
your
just
question.
asked.
Now
question.
you jumped over me.
I guess let me real quick answer my own question. My final meal, way simpler, just a really, really great New York style pizza. That's it.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
That's my meal.
If we could figure out a way to make it stimulating audio, we will deep dive pizza for you someday.
Oh yeah, we love pizza.
All right, so my next question, since it's not George R.R. Martin versus J.R.R. Tolkien, it will be Black Sabbath versus Judas Priest.
Oh man, that's a tough one. But I would say that I just have more exposure to Black Sabbath than Priest. I really like Priest, and I've listened to them quite a bit, but I've listened to Sabbath more. And I would say the thing I like about Sabbath best is that they do darkness pretty well.
They invented darkness almost.
Yeah, and I like that guitar playing of Tony Iommi sometimes with his down-tuned guitars and his slinky strings. He's just got this really great way of playing, and so I'm pretty firmly in the Black Sabbath camp.
I am too, with complete love and respect for Judas Priest. But yeah, I wore out my Paranoid tape.
Yeah,
I still have it. It sounds terrible. It's
you keep everything.
Yeah. Tapes do not last forever.
That is true. All right, so here's a nerdy one. What would be your D&D class and alignment?
My personal, if I'm building myself,
if you're making Nick but in D&D, like, of course I know you're not really a wizard, but you know, if you feel like you identify most with something, what are you?
If I'm just sort of building a fantasy avatar, I'm a chaotic good barbarian.
Okay,
that's my fantasy counterpart.
The savage with the heart of gold.
Yeah, I have a really hard time playing evil, and you know this as you run games that I played in. I just tack.
You don't
goodly
even tend to play chaotic. You play pretty lawful.
By my own laws.
It's because Nick's a nice guy. In real life, he tends to take it into the games. All right, your question.
All right, this is my final question. It's not an A/B. It's a multiple choice.
Oh, man.
What apocalypse are we headed for?
Oh.
Ape uprising? Robot uprising? Atomic holocaust? Or alien invasion?
Oh, man. I didn't even get the one that I think is actually going to happen. I'll cover that in a minute. But I think if we're going to choose, I mean, I don't think nuclear holocaust is coming. I think people are too. There'll be some preemptive strikes if one of those rogue actors is looking to.
It doesn't seem like we're going to Mad Max anymore.
No. I think that we're more likely to have a robot uprising, but not like the Terminator. I think it's going to be way more chill than that. Like, robots handle everything for you, so you just don't have to do anything. And so while it's not a violent transfer of power, it's more like just a transfer of them doing everything because we don't care. It's an apathetic change of power because people are more consumed with, whatever they want to do because nobody actually has to work anymore. We can just do whatever. Yeah, it just becomes all WALL-E style.
We're all just floating in the chairs, drinking our food through straws.
Yeah, no big deal. And I think that's probably more like you. Where I was going when you said apocalypse in my mind was, I think some sort of economic breakdown where there's societal infrastructure collapse, and we descend into a third world style chaos across the world. Now, of course, I just say that because I think it would be a really cool role-playing game to play in, and that's where my mind goes. But
so a less toxic Mad Max scenario.
Yeah, less toxic, a little more civilized than that, but not much.
Interesting. Well, I for one welcome our robot overlords.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. So I think I have one more question. Maybe I did 11, or maybe we just...
No, this should be your number 10, I think.
Okay. So this is another regular guy question. If you could travel anywhere in the world, where would it be? Because we both love to travel. Gone a lot of places. I'm curious, what's at the top of your list right now?
I mean, I haven't internationally traveled much, other than I've been to Japan once and definitely plan to go again. But the next on my list, discounting going back to Japan, is the Netherlands.
Oh,
it's where my family originates from. If anyone actually originates from anywhere, it's where where they were from immediately before coming to America. And I've never been, and I want to go before it's all underwater.
Okay, yeah. I've talked about going there with with friends, and I'm interested. I want to see all of the different Scandinavian areas and things nearby. And of course, I did the whole 23andMe thing, so I've got some Friesland in me as well. So I wanna check that out. So I think that's the last question for our head-to-head rapid fire, and so we're gonna do another music break, and then we'll come back with another segment.
Welcome back again, divers. Thank you to Barrellands for providing our drops and intro music and outro music at the end. We're gonna have one last segment. This will be a regular part of the podcast where we just tell you some of the things that we're enjoying at the moment. And so I'm going to ask Dave, what are you into right now?
Well, I'm into a lot of things all the time because I have a attention deficit brain. But right now, I'm really into Isan, the mastermind behind the band Emperor and recent solo artist. The reason I'm really into him right now, because I've been a fan for a long time. I traveled to Norway to see him play. But he's releasing later this month a new EP called Telemark, which is the city that he's from and where Emperor began. And this EP is done in the style of early Emperor. It's stripped down, more grim black metal. It's not super like raw, gritty, lo-fi like some bands, but Emperor's never been that. They've always been a little more polished. So he's released 2 tracks from it. The first track that he released a little while back is called Strigid or something like that. It's not spelled exactly in English. And it's pretty grim and pretty dark. And he gets some of his more aggro vocals going in it that kind of remind me of some of the older material. And I really liked it. There were a couple little pieces that I wasn't super into, and this is sort of a recurring theme with me in music. I don't really like the sound of saxophone, and he had like this weird drony sound in there that I suspect was a saxophone. It's just kind of an odd thing, but it did not ruin the song for me. I think being somewhat off-putting might have been the point.
That's funny because I remember seeing on Facebook a mutual friend of ours posted more saxophones in black metal, and I remember seeing your comment on it. Just no.
Yeah, absolutely no. I don't want it. So he put out another song just yesterday or the day before from this new EP, and it's called Nord. And it's a little more moody than Strigid, and it's really good. Like, it's so awesome. I'm just a big fan of his, and every time he releases something, I always buy it and I always listen to it. Isan has been a very productive musician. He puts out albums often, every 18 months it seems like, and this one's really cool. That he's doing a throwback style. I feel really lucky that I'm gonna see him this summer play live, because last time I saw him play was more than a decade ago easily. So it's gonna be pretty cool. So what are you into?
Right now, and this will probably be irrelevant by the time anyone hears this, but at the end of January, the 5th and final season of BoJack Horseman dropped onto Netflix. And this has been just so much more of a deeper show than it has any business being a show about a has-been actor anthropomorphic horse, voiced by Will Arnett. The showrunner and creator is Raphael Bob Haxberg or Waksberg. I have terrible handwriting. And if you're not familiar at all with this, it's a story of a horseman who was a TV dad in a TGIF-esque sitcom in the 1990s. And he's a bit of a washed up actor and an alcoholic at this point in the teens. And he has just been on a tremendous dark journey over 5 seasons. And just as he's getting his life together and kind of gotten sober and figured out how to be a decent person, the chickens come home to roost, and some of the darker events of the past seasons come to light, and his just recently re-raveled life starts unraveling again, and I have no idea how it's going to end. Interesting.
I've honestly never watched more than a couple of episodes of that show. I tend to be a little less into silly things, and anthropomorphic horse-headed man just instantly checked the box of silly.
Yeah. I think that it's a show that deals with mental illness and addiction and such dark reflections of our society that the only way that you get through the show without slitting your wrists is the silliness. Those are like the little life preservers that you get, the weird animal puns and just bizarre scenarios that come up. Mm-hmm. Make you laugh just before you're like gonna crawl under your couch and die.
All right. Well, it sounds cool. I guess that's the end of this segment. So how do we want to wrap this up?
Nick and Dave Deep Dive the Metaverse has been made possible by generous bequest from the North American Sake Enthusiast Facebook group. We invite you to join, like, or follow, or whatever the current way you join or deal with Facebook groups is. And you can find us on the internet across virtually all platforms as Deep Dive the Meta. We're on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook,
TikTok,
not Snapchat, but we are on Tumblr and Pinterest. Yeah. And especially I'm posting on all of them, but especially if you want to be prepared for episode 1, there's a lot of interesting articles that I shared on our Tumblr page and our Pinterest page. So,
and I think we're going to keep that up. Share just kind of random, semi-related, or at least interesting to people who find our kind of media fetish interesting.
Yeah. And Vero. We're on Vero. And we've got a little bit of engagement there. I think next episode I'll shout out some of our early followers, people that have liked our various pages. But awesome. I don't have them right in front of me, and you don't want to listen to me look them up.
Yeah, that's no good.
Well, that's a wrap on episode 0.